Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into something really unusual, an event from the 16th century.
That's right. The 1561 Nuremberg celestial phenomenon. It's one of those stories that pops up a lot, especially in like UFO circles.
Exactly, often framed as this, early alien battle. But what we want to do is unpack the actual document, the source you shared,
Yeah, there's this one key broadsheet from the time, and our goal is to figure out what people actually reported seeing back then.
and how they understood it, which is
Mm.
probably very different from how we might see it now.
Completely different. Then versus now, yeah. It's how it went from maybe a divine omen to something else entirely.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're talking April 14th, 1561, Nuremberg, Germany, or, well, the Holy Roman Empire back then.
Right, and it happens early, like really early. Daybreak between 4 and 5 a.m., people are just starting their day.
And the main record we have is this broadsheet. Think of it like a news flyer, maybe a bit sensationalist. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Broadsheets often were. This one was published that same month, April 1561. It's got text in this amazing woodcut illustration.
By a local guy, Hans Glaser. He both described it and drew it. So that's our window into this.
Pretty much our only detailed window from that exact moment.
Okay, so what did Glaser say people saw? Let's get into the actual spectacle.
Right. According to the broadsheet, the sky was just filled, utter chaos. Hundreds of objects.
Not just fuzzy lights either. The descriptions are quite specific, aren't they?
Very. We're talking spheres, globes, crosses, even tube-like shapes, all moving around frantically. Some were glowing.
It sounds incredibly busy up there.
Yeah.
Like a swarm is something.
Yeah, and it wasn't random. There was a structure described. As the sun was rising, witnesses apparently saw two huge blood-red crescent shapes.
Right in the middle of the sun.
Seemingly, yeah, or near it. And around the sun, on all sides, there were clusters of balls. Red ones, black ones, some bluish, grouped together.
And crosses, too.
Red crosses, yeah. And also these long, thin shapes, described as being like reeds or rods, bright red slashes across the sky.
Wow. Okay, so you've got crescents, balls, crosses, tubes, and then what happened? Do they just float there?
No, that's the battle part. The broadsheet says these shapes, especially the globes and the rods or tubes, started fighting vehemently,
Fighting.
moving rapidly across the sky, darting back and forth, even flying in and out of the sun, apparently.
In and out of the sun. That's
Yeah.
quite a claim.
It is. And people reported seeing collisions, flashes of light. And get this, some witnesses claimed smaller spheres seemed to come out of the larger tubular shape.
Like they were being launched. Or released.
That's the implication. It suggests something more mechanical, perhaps, than just random lights. And this whole thing lasted for about an hour.
An hour of this. Celestial chaos. I can't even imagine the fear on the ground.
Must have been terrifying. And the description says the fighting got so intense, it was like the objects themselves got tired.
Exhausted.
Ah.
Objects.
That's the word used, essentially. They seemed to weaken, and then they started falling to earth in flames.
So they crashed.
Well, the report says they fell to earth outside the city and burned up on the ground, creating this thick cloud of smoke. Hellish smoke, it calls it.
Okay, wow. A fiery crash landing after an aerial battle.
Yeah.
And then, was that the end?
Almost. Right after the flaming objects disappeared, one more thing appeared. A huge, black, spear-shaped object.
A spear, like the rods from before.
Bigger, it seems. And just one. It hung there, pointing west. And then a massive crash sound was heard across the city. And that was the end.
That spear. You mentioned that was key for how people interpreted it back then.
Absolutely. For 16th century thinkers, that spear, the navigational spear, as it's called, was probably the most significant part, but not in a technological way.
Not like, oh, it's steering.
No, more like, what did it mean? What was God trying to tell them? Remember, this broadsheet wasn't a scientific report. It was framing the event theologically.
So Glaser presented it as a divine sign.
Exactly. An untapped and unexplained sign from God. The whole spectacle was seen as an allegory. A warning, perhaps, for people to repent their sins.
Be mindful of God's wrath, or maybe be grateful for his mercy for not destroying them entirely?
Precisely. The spear wasn't guiding a craft. It was maybe pointing towards judgment, or maybe pointing the way away from sin. It was symbolic.
And the fiery crosses seen during the battle. That fits right in.
Perfectly. Literal burning crosses in the sky. For people at that time, that would almost certainly be read as a direct symbol of God's anger. This wasn't about physics. It was about morality and salvation.
Okay, but why was Nuremberg so ready to see this as, divine judgment? Was there something specific happening there?
Oh, definitely. That's crucial context. This intense spiritual interpretation didn't come out of nowhere. Nuremberg was going through a really rough patch.
I thought Nuremberg was a major city. Wealthy, important.
It had been, for centuries, a real powerhouse in the Holy Roman Empire. But the Reformation had shaken things up. Nuremberg went Protestant, strongly so.
And that caused problems.
Big problems. Political isolation, conflicts. There was a specific incident where the city refused to fund a local prince's military campaign.
Ah, that probably didn't go over well.
Not at all. The city ended up being attacked, blockaded. Its trade routes, the source of its wealth, were cut off. It was devastating.
So they went from rich and stable to besieged and broke.
Pretty much. They eventually managed to fight back, but the cost was enormous. Heavy taxes were imposed on the citizens, leading to a severe economic depression. People were suffering.
Okay, that makes sense. If your world is falling apart, your business is failing, you're worried about survival.
You're much more likely to see signs of God's displeasure everywhere. Apocalyptic thinking becomes much more common in times of intense upheaval and distress. Fear was palpable.
So, seeing a terrifying battle in the sky wouldn't just be weird, it would feel like confirmation. Proof that God was angry with them specifically.
Exactly. It fed right into their existing anxieties.
All right, let's shift gears. Fast forward a few centuries. How do we look at this event now? The divine wrath explanation doesn't really hold water in a scientific sense.
No. The modern consensus leans heavily towards natural phenomena, specifically atmospheric optics.
Things happening with light and the atmosphere.
Right. The leading candidate is something called parhelia. You probably know them as sundogs.
Oh yeah, those bright spots you sometimes see on either side of the sun.
Exactly. They happen when sunlight passes through ice crystals, hexagonal ones high up in the atmosphere. It creates a halo around the sun. And these two bright spots, the dogs.
Okay, but how do you get from two bright spots to hundreds of fighting spheres, crosses, and tubes?
Well, sundogs aren't always just simple spots. They can be distorted by atmospheric conditions, by moving ice crystals. They can shimmer, appear to move, change shape. You can get pillars of light, arcs.
So if conditions were right, maybe it could look like multiple objects, especially at dawn with weird lighting.
Potentially, yes. And remember the context. People were seeing this through a lens of intense religious fear. They might interpret shimmering lights as moving objects, or distorted shapes as crosses or spheres.
And the reporting itself might have escalated things.
Very likely. Scholars today suggest the story probably got exaggerated as it passed from person to person. The snowball effect.
Someone sees a weird light, tells someone else it looked like a ball, the next person hears about fighting balls.
And by the time it gets to Hans Glaser for his sensationalist broadsheet, it's become this incredibly detailed, dramatic battle. The symbolic imagination of the time, especially in print culture, could have really amplified it.
It became modernist carnage, as one scholar put it, projected onto a natural event.
Possibly. It's a plausible explanation for much of it.
What's really interesting, though, is how this fairly obscure 16th century event became part of the modern UFO conversation. It wasn't widely known for ages, right?
Correct. It was basically forgotten for centuries. Then Carl Jung brought it back.
The famous psychologist.
The very same. In his 1958 book, Flying Saucers, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Sky, he discussed the Nuremberg event.
Why was Jung interested in it? Was he suggesting it was aliens?
Not exactly, that's the twist. Jung was interested in it from a psychological perspective. His theory was about the collective unconscious.
Okay.
He argued that in times of great stress and uncertainty, like, say, 16th century Nuremberg, or indeed the Cold War era when he was writing, people tend to project archetypal images onto the sky. Unexplained things get interpreted through these deep-seated symbolic structures in our minds.
So people under stress might see things in the sky and their minds interpret them as meaningful symbols, like crosses or spears in Nuremberg.
That was his idea. He saw UFO sightings not necessarily as physical craft, but as psychological projections, a modern myth reflecting our anxieties. He explicitly connected the tension in Nuremberg back then to the Cold War fears of his own time.
But wait, you said there's a twist.
Yes. The great irony is that Jung personally thought the Nuremberg event itself was probably a natural phenomenon.
Like the sundogs.
Yes. He believed it was likely atmospheric optics, just amplified and interpreted through the religious and military narratives available at the time, crosses, spears, battle.
So he used it as an example of psychological projection onto a natural event.
But because he included it in a book titled Flying Saucers and discussed it alongside modern UFO reports, He inadvertently helped popularize the idea that Nuremberg was an actual sighting of unexplained aerial objects, maybe even extraterrestrial ones.
Wow, so the guy trying to explain it psychologically ended up boosting the alien interpretation.
Pretty much. He put it on the map for modern ufology, even though that wasn't his intention.
Which brings us to how ufologists, people who study UFOs, see
Yeah.
it today. They don't buy the sundog explanation entirely, do they?
Not usually, no.
Right.
The counterargument focuses on the details in Glazer's report. They argue that simple light refraction doesn't adequately explain everything described.
Like what, specifically?
The sheer complexity and structure, the description of distinct shapes, spheres, tubes, crosses, the coordinated movements, fighting, darting, moving in formation.
And that detail about smaller spheres coming from larger tubes.
Exactly. That detail suggests mechanical action, something beyond just light effects. They emphasize that witnesses seem to be describing structured objects behaving with intent.
And doing so over 300 years before humans had powered flight.
That's a key point for them. How could people in 1561 describe things that sound, to some ears, like modern aerial phenomena if it was just ice crystals? They see it as evidence of something genuinely anomalous.
So wrapping this up for the listener, we've gone from a 16th century broadsheet describing celestial terror to, well, quite a few different interpretations.
Yeah, it boils down to three main lenses, doesn't it? First, the original view. A terrifying symbolic warning from God, reflecting the deep anxieties of Nuremberg at that time.
Second, the modern scientific view. Likely a complex display of atmospheric optics, probably sundogs, misinterpreted and exaggerated due to fear in the reporting process.
And third, the ufological perspective. A genuine early observation of unexplained aerial phenomena, maybe structured craft, exhibiting behaviors that atmospheric effects can't fully explain.
It's a fascinating case study, really. Shows how the same event can be filtered through completely different belief systems, spiritual, scientific, or extraterrestrial.
Absolutely. It tells us as much about the interpreters as it does about the event itself. The meaning changes depending on the anxieties and knowledge of the era looking back at it.
History isn't static, is it? We keep reshaping it based on our own context.
Which leads to maybe one final thought, something for you to ponder. Our source, the broadsheet, mentions this wasn't a one-off.
Oh, there were other sightings.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah.
Similar phenomena. Those same kinds of shapes, globes, rods, crosses were reportedly seen over Nuremberg several times during that same period of intense hardship.
So the same weird stuff, repeatedly, in the same distressed location.
Exactly. So the question is, does that repetition strengthen the case for a natural phenomenon? Like maybe the weather conditions in that region were just right for complex sundogs frequently during those years.
Or does it lean the other way? Does repetition suggest something more persistent, maybe even intentional, a presence, whatever it was, focusing on that specific place during its time of crisis?
The broadsheet gives us no answer to that. It just leaves us with the account and the enduring mystery.